Hi, everyone. I'm here today to give you a practical exercise that I use and I think is really fun and beneficial. You can use it for yourself, which is my first recommendation. You can use it with another person to practice on, to practice with, and you can also use it in a group environment. So I'm going to address this today as if you're going to be doing it for yourself. And then I'll get at the end of the video just a few tweaks out of how you can utilize this in either a one-on-one or a group type setting. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I want to give you a supply list. This is really super simple. I would just suggest that you get pen and paper. And the other thing I want you to get is some cardstock. Now, I like to use these large index cards. Doesn't matter whether it has lines on it or not. But if you want to get some cardstock, that's perfectly fine. The point of using cardstock is you're going to be writing on these, and I don't want you to see what's on the other side. So make sure you use a pen or a pencil and that you can't see through it whenever you're writing on it. So that's really all you need for this exercise. Oh, and some scissors. All right, now that you have your cardstock, what I want you to do is basically cut them down into card sizes. Now, I took my cardstock and I made them roughly this size. So it's kind of like a deck of playing cards. If you want to use them like this, you're more than welcome to do that. And I think that that's okay as well. For me personally, I want you to be able to shuffle your cards. So if the index card size is fine for you, you are more than welcome to do that. I liked doing it this way at first, but again, it's really a personal preference for you. So I also want you to have at least 20 of these. And I know that sounds like a lot. So you can have either 20 of the small cards, 20 of the index cards. You just need to be capable of shuffling it, writing it, and not being able to see through it. So let's do that step next. Okay, so now this comes the challenging part. And what I want you to do is you're going to find 20 questions that you want answers to. And I'm not talking about these big existential questions. I want these questions to be things that are really important to you. Psychic functioning responds when we have this need, when there is a great desire for something. So I want you to think about those questions that are really relevant to you right now. It may be focused on some health challenges that you're dealing through. Maybe there's a challenging relationship that you want some solutions for. Maybe it's about your career and those types of aspects on where you want to focus. What are your passions, your joys, things that are really challenging for you, that are stumping you and you want answers to. So most of you can probably come up with at least 5 or 6 of those questions that are standing out in your mind right now. So whatever comes to you first, I want you to write those down. Now that you have your questions, I want you to take the 15 most important ones, and I want you to write one question on one piece of cardstock. Whether you do it on this size or whether you do it on this size really doesn't matter. You don't have to elaborate. Keep it super simple. For example, one thing you might put is challenges with my lungs, right? Or perhaps unable to lose weight on this one, or struggling with my mom. So they don't have to elaborate. You understand what it is that you're looking for in the challenge, right? That's the challenge, so to speak. That's all you need to put on the card. One question per card. You have 20 cards, but you're only going to choose the top 15 questions. That's because the other 5 cards are going to remain blank. And I'll explain why in a minute. So let's take a moment to do that step next. Okay, so by now you should have 20 cards with 15 questions on one side, blank on the other, and the other 5 cards are blank on both sides. Now, the next important step here is to take all the questions and make sure that they're face down. So for example, if I've written diet and health on this particular card, I'm going to make sure that I put it face down so that the only side that I see is this. Take all of your cards with all the questions face down and stack them one upon another. So you basically have a deck of cards. Once you have all 20 cards, including the ones with no questions on them, I would like you to shuffle those with the question side remaining down. You don't want to look at the questions, but you do want to shuffle them. I want it so that what's going to happen is you have no idea which card has which question and which card actually might be blank. All right, so go ahead and get your cards shuffled, keep them face down, and don't cheat. All right. So this next step is something where I'm going to give you an option of how you would like to handle this step. Ideally, I would suggest that you take your cards, keep the questions face down, set them off to the side, and don't touch them for about 4 or 5 days. Now, the reason that I suggest that is because I want to give your brain a chance to just kind of detach from those questions. I don't want you focusing on them. I don't want you guessing. If, however, you're excited and you just want to get started, and I understand that, I do that myself sometimes, then go ahead and do it right away. It's really up to you. There's benefits and drawbacks to both of those. So ideally now what you have is you have a stack of 20 cards where you can now see the questions. You've shuffled them, so you have no idea which questions and which cards are where. I simply want you to draw one card out of that stack, ensuring that the question side is facing away from you. The only thing that you are seeing is the blank card. So here's where the psychic portion begins. You're going to take this card, set it down on the table with the question face down, pick up your pen and pencil, and I want you to write whatever is coming to you that needs to be written onto that card. Now, if you're a little confused or a little hesitant, you're probably going to think, well, how do I know what the question is? You don't, and that's the point. I simply want you to write, draw, whatever comes to mind. If you hear or have a feeling about it, it needs to go on the blank side of the card. This is forcing you to detach from the question, and it's allowing you to hone in only onto those internal signals that you're having that need to be put onto that paper. So if you want to hold the card, you're welcome to do that. This is one way that I do it. And I'll ask you, as you hold this card, how do you feel? Do you get a good feeling? Do you get a bad feeling? Does it feel icky? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Is there some part of your body that's starting to twitch or feels a little pain or feels a little abnormal? What is it about this card that makes you feel good or bad? Identify those emotions and write them down. Because you're asking for an answer in relationship to this question, it's also important to ask how you feel about the solution for this problem. So, for example, does the solution to this problem feel positive? Does it feel negative? Does it feel challenging? Are you fearful? This is where the psychic insight comes in for you. It's not just about how this situation makes you feel, but what's the solution to the situation? How does that make you feel? It may bring up some fear. You may have a visual image of something from the past or some type of a visual cue that is significant and relevant to this question. The point is not to censor or to think about the question, which is why I have you writing it face down and shuffling them so you really don't know what the question is involving. This detaches you from the question and forces you to seek for an answer inside yourself. If you hear a phrase, a word, a song lyric, for example, I've had this happen, which was really fun, where a song lyric will come into mind, or a movie, a character from a play, a friend, anything that comes into your mind, I don't want you to censor it. So I'm going to give you some time now, and I would put a time limit on it, and there's a reason for that. I only want you to give yourself 5 minutes to process whatever's coming through in relationship to your question. So whether you do that today or tomorrow, I'm going to leave you with that. And when you're ready, join me for the next step. As soon as you answered that, I want to invite you to go ahead and flip your card over now and look at the question. Now, this is where the second part of kind of developing our psychic abilities comes through. When you get all of these symbols and feelings, there's a very interpretive process that has to take place. How is what you received relevant to the question that you asked? And so that's where processing psychic information isn't just about the receptive side, it's about understanding the very interesting and symbolic ways in which psi information comes through. It's not direct the way you and I are speaking now. It's very indirect. It's very symbolic. It's very allegorical in nature. And so you need to take the insights that were perceived on the card and ask yourself how they fall into relation to the question. Sorry about that. So the other thing is if you happen to draw a card that had no question, the reason I did that is because it may be important sometimes to just allow psychic information to free flow. You don't know what's going to come through, why, or for who. And I'm going to give you a really interesting example. When I did this for myself, I didn't know that I had a blank card. I simply put the card out and I started writing down on there. And I heard a couple of different things. I heard Heartbreak Hotel, and then I immediately moved into Hotel California. So I thought, well, this is really interesting. This doesn't make any sense for me. I don't have any heartbreak going on. I don't have any connections to California. There were a couple of other things on the card that just didn't make any sense to me. Lo and behold, a friend of mine texted me roughly a few hours later. We ended up discussing some things that were going on with her personally, and these things applied to her. So I got very excited in the sense that she had a person that she was intimately connected to that was in California. The relationship was breaking apart at that time. And this individual also happened to be someone who sang in hotels. So there was this enormous correlation, which was really, really very fascinating, that I went, I received some psychic information. And so I took a look at some of that other information that was on that card, and I tapped into my psychic self, and I tried to assist her with seeing what was going on for herself and how we could move and manage through some of that. So you really don't know what's going to come through on your blank card. And that's the other point. Don't want you thinking about, well, it could be this question, maybe it's that question, because then you're targeting your psychic answer. Then you're asking for information from a question that you've already pre-received. This is why I sometimes tell people, put your questions away for about a week and don't look at them, because you subconsciously know what your questions are. If you start thinking about one question, you may put those answers on your card, and they may be for the question that you were thinking of, not the question that was on the card. So I want you to detach from thinking about a question and only focus on the internal sensations that you are having without censoring them. That can be tough to do, but this is the secret to psychic development, is detaching and receiving and honing in on that information that you have going on inside. So I want you to kind of do that and only ask one question a day. And then take that question, whatever we wrote on the card, and start thinking about that. Look for those correlations. Look for those little clues. And I'm going to give you another example here. I have a lot of health-related issues, and sometimes one of the things that I like to do is put a list of different supplements on my card or a list of different foods. And then I'll pick up that particular card and I'll try to see and feel what I'm getting and related to that. If one particular card makes me see red or gives me an upset tummy, or I just feel this discomfort with it, I'll flip the card over and I'll go, oh, wow, this is this supplement. It's interesting that I'm having this feeling about it today. What else was on my card? Now, that doesn't mean that that supplement won't be good for me in another day, but this is just a way that we can start honing in our developmental skills, recognizing these psychic symbols for ourselves, and then correlating them to the questions that we ask and the need that we have for those answers. This is why psychic ability is for you first, And it's about attuning into yourself and bringing that information forward into your awareness so that you can move it into applicable ways in your daily life. Okay, so I hope I haven't over elaborated on that, but I wanted to give you a couple of suggestions on how do you do it. So that's how you use it for yourself. Ideally, you've got 2 weeks worth of questions there, some of them being blank cards. If you do one per day and then really ponder what you've been going on, you've got 2 weeks worth of exercises that you can try. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about how you can do this exercise in a practice one-on-one environment. Now, if you are sitting with a friend, if you are both in the same room together, I would recommend you going through the same process. Take 20 cards, write down 15 questions, leave 5 cards blank. And essentially what you're doing is you're passing your 20 cards to that person, and they are passing you their 20 cards. At that point, what you can do, depending on how comfortable you can feel, you can start with 1 and then talk about it. Or I would suggest maybe doing 3 or 4, feeling into 3 or 4 cards. So give yourself 5 minutes per card, draw another question, give yourself 5 minutes for that card, draw another question, and then only maybe do 3, 4, or 5 of those. Then what you can do is sit down, share what you've gotten with that other person about that question, and both of you really discuss how that information may relate to the other person. This does 2 things I think that you can't get by doing it by yourself. First of all, you're gaining validation from the person that's sitting across from you. They can help you interpret or understand the signs and symbols or even the feelings that you may be getting that you're simply not going to be able to evaluate for yourself. So that validation and that feedback is very important. The second really beneficial part of this, of course, is that you're doing it for someone else and you really have no idea what those questions are. So there's not some part of your subconscious mind that is feeding you the answers based on the fact that you think you know what the question is. You're really working blind. Now, I realize this can be scary. I call this the utilization or the practice phase, right? And that is a scary thing to put ourselves out there. What if we're wrong? You're going to be wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've been wrong. You have to be wrong to learn how to be right. Take those things that were right, focus on those, and ask yourself, how did that feel differently? Oh, perhaps I was really good at getting the feelings right, but my visuals didn't make any sense. Or maybe my visuals were really good, or maybe I heard this and those were really right on, but what I was feeling is a lot of personal fear and a lot of personal self-doubt. Those are discerning aspects. You have to have failures to have successes. It's just the way that it works. So don't be frightened. Find someone that's safe. Find someone that you can easily practice with who will help you with that feedback, but that you can be okay with making mistakes with, because that's an important part of the growth and what I call that utilization phase, that practice that you need to have to get you learning those skills. So that's how you can do it one-on-one. So here's a couple of suggestions if you're deciding to do this virtually. Obviously, if you're in presence and contact with someone, you guys can just simply swap the cards at the physical level, and then you can actually take them and hold them. If you're doing this in a virtual setting, it'll still work. Now, don't let this hold you up, because remember, psychic processing works beyond time and space. Sometimes that's a little bit of a hiccup for people and they have to get beyond that. We find it easier sometimes to, well, I want to be there, I want to be present, I want to hold, or I want to touch something. That is certainly okay. It is easier in the beginning for us to do it that way, I think, sometimes, because we have that mental block. We don't think that we can do it unless we're there and we're in person. I promise you the psychic ability works outside of time and space, and you don't need to be. That's more of a mental block on our part than it is anything else. But if you're doing it virtually, I want to give you just some tips and strategies for how you can cope with that. So I would encourage each of you to still write out your 20 cards. Make sure there's 15 questions and 5 that are blank. Since you're doing it virtually, for example, you're going to be reading me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of my cards and the question will be facing me. I will now be able to see it, but you will not. This is why it needs to be cardstock and it needs to be written in a way that the person can't see it. Since you're practicing, you can't see my question. But what I want you to do is simply focus on this card. Remember, it's no different than if it's in your hands. You can even imagine that the card is in your hands right now. You can pretend that you're holding it. You can pretend that you're focusing on that question. And then having done that, I want you to move back inside into your internal self and ask yourself what information you're getting about the question that's on that card. It's beneficial, I think, to some degree that the sitter, right, which would be me, I see my question. I know what that question is. And so in some ways, that may help you tune in and get a little bit of extra information. It's still not cheating because you don't know my question, and that's okay. As you do this virtually back and forth for one another, once you're done, I would say maybe do 3 or 4 cards and then stop. Try to also give yourself a time limit. Again, there's a reason for that. Giving yourself a time limit doesn't give you time to think about it. I want you to do it just quick enough where you kind of just have to do a quick assessment about what you're seeing, hearing, and feeling without overthinking or analyzing it. Thinking and analyzing inhibits psi. We don't want that. We just want to be into our senses and into our sensations and into our visuals or whatever we're hearing that comes in an auditory format as well. So after you've done a couple of cards, then what I would encourage you to do is to talk back and forth about the impressions that you got and how they relate to my question. This is a critical part of the practice that you do with others. You're going to get that feedback. They're going to be able to help you to discern those things which are valid from perhaps those things where it either doesn't make any sense to that person right now, or it may have just been your mind creating things, because that does happen. Discernment is a part of the practice. So anyway, that's one way that you can practice with another individual on a one-on-one basis. Okay, the other way that you can use this is in a group setting. And I think it can be a lot of fun if you have a group of people that are open-minded, or if you're even in a development circle or in a practice teaching type of environment. So what you will do is you would actually take your cards, and then you would still have people write questions down. I would encourage that each participant do at least 5 questions. And then at the bottom of your card, just write your first name down. Okay, you're going to know your question, but just it makes it a little bit easier whenever we move into that validation phase, that you go, okay, this is Carol's question, and here's what she asked. So now that you have all of those questions, you're going to put them into a big bowl or a box or something where that they can be shuffled, for making sure that the question side remains down. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to pass that bowl around the participants. Each person is going to take one card and pass the bowl around the circle. When the bowl comes back to you, take an additional question. Ideally, if you filled out 3 questions, you need to draw 3 cards. If you filled out 5 questions, then you need to draw 5 cards. Now, you can do this all at once, or you can go one round and then draw again. It's really up to you on how you want to handle that. It's a personal decision based on the group and what feels right for you guys. Once each person in the circle or participating in the class has the card, the exercise remains the same. You don't look at the question, you focus on the card for a moment, and then you move inward and start getting whatever you're getting and writing it. I think that this can be a lot better if you use a full index card, because that gives that individual a little bit more chance to write more information. Keep the time limit on it, 4 or 5 minutes max. Usually if you're in a development circle or a training situation, someone is moderating or in charge of the circle for that day. They can have a timer that you set off that goes off so that you stop it at any particular given time. At that point, and this is where development circle and practice can become a little lengthy, you take turns going around and validating. The best way I recommend doing that, and of course do it your own way, is flipping your card over, reading your question. So Carol asked about health and the supplements that are best for her. Okay, and at that point, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the insights that I received about this question. Take a quick couple of moments for that person to validate for you what the information was about. I think that these are really fun exercises to do in a group practice because we learn from others. We watch other people have successes, and also I hate to use the word, but mistakes or errors. Again, this is a part of the developmental process. Sometimes people have to go home and go, wow, I didn't understand what she said when she told me this about the supplement, but now I do. Now it makes sense. And so it's really about trusting what you're getting, being okay with not always having that validation, but really examining what's happening and taking place. And so that's the basics of how you can do it in a group environment. Can be time consuming to let each person validate. So again, I think you probably want to set a timer on that, 5 minutes for focusing and then 5 minutes for sharing and validation. Unfortunately, that seems really restrictive, but if you're someone who's moderating a group or practice environment, you have to be very time conscious or you're all going to sit there all night long validating each other's answers and questions. So anyway, so that's how you can do it in a fun group environment. You can even do it as a party fun just to see what people get. It's sometimes I think people amaze themselves. So if you get a group of open-minded people and you want to have a little fun, give it a shot. So anyway, this is one of the exercises that I love doing for myself. I think it's a great practice exercise to do with others and to do in a group environment. So give it a try. I would love to hear about how some of these worked out for you, how you had some aha moments, or even if you have any questions or challenges, or if I slipped up and missed an instruction somewhere. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this exercise. I'll be sure to share more soon. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.